Hello students, this is Dr. Raj Shikara again, and this particular video I'm actually going to talk to you regarding the strategy that is required to be followed. It's of course a guideline for students who have decided to prepare for anthropology. As in the last video I talked to you about why anthropology is a good option and why students choose it, what factors actually influence this type of decision. But let's say you made the decision, you decided that anthropology is the option for you. Then what type of approach you require and what timeline are you looking into? Okay, right. So here I would like to divide this whole process into three phases. Phase one, where you collect the standard references after understanding the syllabus. Okay, and write down the syllabus, and for each topic you identify the subtopics by properly figuring out the scope of each topic. Okay, so you will have an idea about what areas to cover under. So each subheading has to be figured out under each topic. And then using the standard references, there are many standard references in the market. So choose. I don't suggest you to buy all of them at the moment. So to begin with, what you do, find those ones that probably are very, very important. I suggest you to ember and pick up some of the well-known faculties materials that are popular. So these standard references you can find from rankers websites, or many institutions are suggesting those references. Pick up some of those things. Start there. Okay, and you choose what area you want to start with: socio-cultural anthropology, biological anthropology, or archaeology. By picking up those standard references and collect the data and information with respect to each subtopic you identify. Okay, you may not get the final picture about the scope and the subtopic of it. You may get it in the process of reading it. That is also all right, but you have to have this process to begin. Next, you grasp these concepts by reading that information and getting concept right. And also, I always prefer students to use at least one alternate material. Don't just stick to one particular material. Read the same topic from a different material, so you have anything that is missing or anything that you misunderstood can be rectified here. And in the process, I recommend you to make notes. Okay, because I know students can either make notes online by using computers or other electronic devices. That is probably suggestible, but at the same time, given that in the exam you have to write it on the paper, I recommend you to spare enough time on the paper. Okay, write some notes, write some content, so that you are actually practicing to write, because many of us probably have not written for a long time because we rely too much on the online tools, right, or electronic devices. So do that. So it has to happen on both the directions, and especially if you are making online notes, make sure that you have a server where you save it. Like for example, you can create a Google account, Google Drive you can create, where you can store the information. So for the information that you have on your computer, the way you're typing and collecting it, there is a backup to it. Okay, around 15 GB data you get for free from Google. You can create an account like that, especially for your anthropology preparation, or use something like a Dropbox. It doesn't matter, whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, and store a backup. Do that. Okay, and also make sure to write this on a paper. So for this, depending on how much time commitment that you have, and depending on whether you're working and simultaneously preparing for the exam, you may need about 3 to 4 months roughly. Okay, this has to be done as soon as you chose the anthropology option. And make sure that you do it on a regular basis. Let's say you give a 1 week break. So you will go back by at least few days, because it will take enough time for you to recapture the information and come to that same speed that you are at. Okay, so make sure to do it on a regular basis. This is the phase one part, which should be the first phase. Then after you finish going through the material, collecting the data and putting it together, so you come to the phase two, where you give it a second read. And second read is where actually you probably started thinking. I don't mean that in the first read you didn't think, but the amount of knowledge you gained in the first read will now make you better, at capturing the information. So here you may identify a few gaps. So what do you do? Once you identify the gaps, you collect the information from various sources. I was telling you in the first video, could be online sources, YouTube sources, for example. So where you collect the information and fill that gap. And in the process, make sure that you fill the information, and also make sure to collect the case studies relevant to each and every area. So what type of case study can you discuss? For example, epidemiological anthropology, you can talk about coronal scenario, how humans have started responding to it, how they dealt with it, where did it come from, what is our ideas about origin. So what type of aspects are changing that is kind of influencing what type of diseases are showing up, how our response is changing with respect to it. Or in other disease category, you can talk about changing trends, like non-communicable diseases are becoming more and more popular. So you focus on those, take up standard studies, okay, and make sure that when you take up these examples and the case studies, you can take, because in the literature you may find hundreds of such sources, but make sure that you find a source that is standard in the field, that is considered to be standard. Okay, that is very important to convince the examiner. At the same time, you can add examples from the recent newspaper articles, for example. Okay, but make sure to use the standard references as well for that. Okay, and also you're now starting to work on the diagrams and flowcharts. Partly you might have done this in the phase 1, but I also highly recommend you to put together some diagrams and flowcharts. They get better once you capture the information well, once you grasp the information well. Okay, so you organize the information by using relevant diagrams and relevant flowcharts. And all this, you're not only working with the content and resources, you're also working, based on what type of questions have come in the exam. For those questions which are repeatedly coming in the exam, make sure to write the flowcharts. But remember, I'm not suggesting here to follow that method, but wherever I think you are able to take the advantage of it, do it. But you have to prepare for the new topics as well and new questions that, as well in the exam. So this, I'm assuming that you may take about 1.5 months time, again depending on your commitment. So now, by now you might have finished collecting data, you might have finished filling the gaps and adding right diagrams, flowcharts, examples and case studies. Now the next phase is the most important phase that some students tend to ignore this. Okay, so what is that phase? In this phase, you notice that we have to practice writing. We have to work on presenting the information. This is the biggest aspect of it. Some students tend to think that they know the information, they know how to write it, but it won't happen. Because in the exam scenario, in that stressed mindset, you need to have enough clues that are practiced beforehand. And this can happen between prelims and mains. If you have enough time, do it beforehand. But this can happen after you finish writing the prelims. You are confident, or if you have not done prelims very well, that's all right. Make use of this time and do practice of answer writing at this time. How do you do it? One, so probably while writing the answers, you might have practiced, organize the information. Now in the exam setup, either you can take the test from an organization and do it, or we also have many online platforms like Telegram groups are there where you can present your answers and they will give you feedback. But it is essential for you to get feedback and be open-minded, be patient, because most of us are not trained to write like this. Our institutions, our courses won't teach us. So we have to know that we have to start from that point where you don't know how to write this information well. So be patient, accept the feedback in a positive manner. Don't have to follow everything that is given by others. So that's why we need to have at least 2 evaluators working on a single type of question. So make sure that you follow different platforms for that, so that you now have an idea that where common points are coming on with respect to your answer writing. Improvise them. Work on them and improvise them. So focus on that. Then, so wherever you felt the diagram can be retuned or remodified from what you already made, you do it as per the question, because the question that you might have prepared from the previous exams may not exactly fit into what they are asking. Okay, then you have to retune the diagram and work on the flowcharts to reach the demand. Okay, and also where possible, if you have come across after your preparation any few recent examples, add them. But make sure to add them along with the standard ones so evaluator can follow that information. Okay, this should be your phase 3. By the end of phase 3, you should probably be very confident in not only knowing the information and presenting the information. But I wanted to give you a few things as a warning signs here. Keep an eye on the changing patterns. Like for example, anthropology questions are given. In anthropology, archaeology questions are given as part of other questions. Okay, there you have a limited choice of leaving them out. So make sure to cover it and never ever risk by selective reading, because few questions always have come from one particular chapter. It doesn't mean that it is going to be the case in future. Okay, hope these guidelines are helpful to you, and I'm wishing you all the best in this exam, and we'll come up with few more interesting videos related to these topics. Right? Thank you guys.